legislative leaders fairly recently, and they have met with me a number of times to talk about the end of the legislative session, the fiscal and economic issues in particular, and I appreciate the cordial meetings we've had over the last few days, but cordiality shouldn't be mistaken for concurrence. And there are some significant concerns that I have about the budgetary bills that are being considered in their current form. As we've discussed over the last week or so, Vermont's got some serious fiscal and economic problems. We have a property tax burden that's second highest in the nation. Only New Hampshire residents pay a higher property tax burden than Vermonters, and yet we have the smallest student-teacher ratio in America. So Vermonters are paying more than anybody else, except folks in New Hampshire, for a school infrastructure that is quite robust. I think it's critically important that the legislature, before it adjourns, do something to stop the dramatic increase in property taxes that Vermonters are struggling to pay. In the last 5 years, education property taxes have doubled from $450 million to $900 million. And last year alone, we saw a further decline of about 1,600 kids in our school population, and yet the schools employed 218 more people. Well, I don't know of a business in Vermont or anywhere else that would operate that way. Vermonters are having to pay more and more and more with no relief as school spending continues to rise out of control. And at the state level, in our general fund, as we've discussed over the last few days, we need to make some changes that will actually create some jobs in our state. In the beginning of the session, we were told it was going to be the job session. And the legislative majority had a jobs forum. A lot of business people came and talked about the problems they're dealing with and what needs to be done to improve prospects for a strong recovery. And one witness said at that jobs forum, the single most important thing you can do to create more jobs in Vermont is rescind the changes in the capital gains tax. And then we've had other people come to the State House, like the manufacturer earlier this week, who explained how unpleasant it was to get a retroactive estate tax bill from the state and have to scramble because all of her money and that of her siblings is not in cash in the bank somewhere. It's tied up in the business, employing 120 Vermonters, and then they get this $250,000 bill because the estate tax was enacted retroactively. We've got to make some fundamental changes that will allow Vermont employers to create more jobs and Vermont taxpayers to have a more reasonable burden. So I'm going to continue to urge the legislative majority to make the kinds of changes that will really get our economy moving again, put us on a sustainable track for the future, and not just kick the can down the road. Now, one idea I heard them discuss, perhaps they did with you, is, well, we just might have to use some of our reserves, some of our rainy day funds. That would be a serious mistake, because rainy day funds, as I've explained to them repeatedly, are to be used for unanticipated shortfalls, not anticipated ones. While the legislature's meeting and can enact a budget, they shouldn't be accessing those funds, which are one-time and will need to be repaid at some point in the future. And how are they going to be repaid? Because what they're talking about is not raising the school property tax by more spending, transferring more out of the general fund and leaving a huge hole there. Well, who believes that they can seriously reduce general fund spending for fiscal 2012 by $100 million? They're having an awful tough time making some decisions now. So what are they going to do? Raise more taxes. That's their only answer. So we've got to put a stop to this. We can't have the kind of tax burden that Vermonters are shouldering now. It's only going to get worse in the future unless the legislature can make some decisions. One of my discussions with the leaders went something like this. If you don't like my ideas on school spending reform, do something. Do something to arrest this incredible increase in property taxes that Vermonters continue to pay. So I don't see a budget that I think moves us in the direction where Vermonters need to go. I don't see a budget at this point that gets us to where we're going to be able to create more jobs and and get on to the path of prosperity, I think we've got a lot more work to do.